back, everybody. I wanted to talk today about how to live in a car. I've lived in a car off and on a few times over the years, and then did it for a better part of a year in a Toyota Camry. And people have asked me, how did you do that? Wasn't it awful? You know, to be honest, it wasn't a bad experience at all. I didn't mind it at all. It was a little crowded sometimes, a little small, but for the most part, the only real issues I had were the ground clearance was so low in the car that you get a lot of BLM and Forest Service roads, and they're rocky or rutted. I had to back out of a lot of roads because they deteriorated to the point that I just didn't dare to go any further with that car. And on a similar note, the car was great in the snow, but it was terrible in the mud. So I'd often have to back out or turn around if it started getting muddy. And there's more than a few times I was in somewhere and I had to wait till it dried out because it was muddy and I didn't think I'd be able to get out. So those were really the only problems I had with living in the car. Other than that, it was fine. It wasn't bad. So I thought I'd share a few things I learned out of my experiences in the hopes that it'll help some other people who are either thinking about living in a car or who have just started living in a car and maybe looking for some tips to improve their experience. It's worth noting that I'm a minimalist and have been for many years, so I don't have a lot of stuff and I travel light, and that was essential. I was able to fit everything literally into the trunk of the Camry, and the Camry didn't have that big of a trunk, but I could fit everything into the trunk and have the passenger area of the car completely empty and only take stuff out when I was camped somewhere. So that allowed me to look discreet, not look like I was living in the car. And it's also something I've commented on to people before, and I've heard others who live in cars and small vehicles comment on, is that you have to approach it like a backpacker. And so if you think about a backpacker who might live for months or longer out of a backpack while they're hiking or traveling, everything they need is in that backpack. And so if you think like that, then a car, even a small car, can be comfortable because you, instead of a nylon tent, you have a solid vehicle you're sleeping in, and it can move itself around, but everything is compact and you just don't need a lot of stuff. So if you think like a backpacker, it'll work a lot easier living in a car. One of the keys with living in a small vehicle is to be mindful of the idea that you live out of the vehicle rather than in the vehicle. So you may sleep in the vehicle, and like in my case, as a freelancer, I also work in the vehicle. But other than that, I try to be out of the vehicle, and I use the vehicle as a base to retreat into when I need to sleep or need shelter from the weather. But I try not to spend all my time in the vehicles. I'll share with you now some keys that I found essential to successfully living out of a car or a small vehicle. The first is to downsize your stuff, especially if you come out of a house or an apartment. You just are not going to fit it all in there. So just understand starting off that you're going to have to get rid of a lot of stuff to be able to fit comfortably into a car. And the second key is to replace the essential gear you feel that you do need with lighter and smaller items whenever possible. So for example, replacing your heavy and large kitchenware with like a backpacker's set of pots and dishes that nest together will be much easier and take up a lot less space than trying to bring full-size kitchen things. And you multiply that out across a number of different items and it adds up to a lot of space savings. Organization is essential when you're living in a small vehicle. It's easy to think, oh, I can't possibly lose anything in a car. I don't need to be organized. Believe it or not, you can lose stuff in a car. It's especially if you're not really well organized. And the more you have to start moving stuff around, the more aggravating it is. It's frustrating, and things get placed under other things and fall behind stuff. And so what most people end up doing is using a combination of like plastic boxes with lids and duffel bags or similar equipment. And that allows you have to play with what works for you, for your needs, and for the space you have to work with. Hard-sided boxes, of course, retain their shape. Duffel bags collapse down. That can be an advantage or a disadvantage for either one, depending on what you're trying to do and your space constraints. But the combination of those will allow you to stay organized. You put like things in certain boxes or bags, and then you know where stuff is when you need to find it, as long as you put things away. So the fourth key to a successful car living, I think, is having a plan for camping or where you're going to sleep at night. Ideally, you'll be able to stay somewhere for a while at a time, but even if you have to move every day, have an idea for where you're going. And that'll save you gas mileage on your vehicle and stress of wondering every night if you're going to be able to find a place to sleep. The fifth key is cooking and meal preparation plans. You don't going to want to have to eat out at a restaurant all the time because, for one thing, it's expensive. For a second thing, if you're doing any boondocking or rural camping, you may be many miles from the nearest restaurant or place to get food. So having a plan for how you're going to prepare meals is essential. When I started off in the Camry, what I did was, for cooking, was I'd open the trunk and set my stove on a plastic box in the trunk and cook on that. That worked okay as long as it wasn't raining or it wasn't really windy. But if it was, I was out of luck for being able to cook anything. And I was also pretty limited in what I could do because I just didn't have any counter space to work with. So I eventually found a folding table that fit well into the trunk, and that was really a game changer for me, being able to set that up outside. And as long as the weather was halfway decent, I had some workspace where I could prepare foods and cook, and it allowed me to do a lot more with my meal options. But even if you have an outside table, you're still going to want to have some food that doesn't need to be cooked, whether that's like sandwich stuff or, like trail mix or granola or snack food type things, fruits, vegetables, things that don't have to be cooked, because sometimes you're just not going to be able to get out and cook because of weather or because of you're trying to be discreet and keep a low profile. So having some food you can prepare in the car is really important. The sixth key that I found is essential is privacy. Now I'm from the Northeast originally, and then Montana and Wyoming. We have forests, so when you go camping, you got trees around, and the natural vegetation provides some privacy. Well, you get down here somewhere like in the desert in Arizona, where I am right now, and it's wide open, and it's hard to get out of sight of other people in the winter because there's enough people down here. So you might be 50 or 100 yards from your nearest neighbor if you're lucky, but you're still line of sight. So you're going to want some privacy for that. And of course, if you do an urban stealth camping, you're also going to need privacy. So window tint is a really essential thing that if you at all can get your car windows tinted, if they're not already, it will be very helpful. It's worth the investment if you can do it. And just go as dark as you legally can in your state, because that'll give you some built-in privacy. Just, people have to be close to the vehicle to see inside. So that'll help you out a lot. And then you're going to want blackout curtains that you can hang up inside. And all that is just some kind of black fabric. Could be fleece, could be cotton sheets, whatever. But you're just going to want some black material that you can hang up. Heavier, like fleece, will give you more privacy, of course. But you want some material to hang up inside the van along the windows to give you complete privacy. And by using black, the key is that if the vehicle just looks dark inside, and it's especially true if you're using it behind tinted windows, it just doesn't look like anything's going on inside. Whereas if you put up reflectics or bright colored curtains, it's obvious they're curtains. So the blackout curtains just allow you to be discreet is the key. Now, when I first got down to Ehrenberg about a year ago, again, I come down from Wyoming, and I got here, and I was in a Camry, and I had slightly tinted windows, but they weren't very dark, and I didn't have curtains yet. And so I got here, and it was fairly busy around the first of the year, and I was maybe 50 yards from my nearest neighbor, but boy, it was like being in a fishbowl, because I was line of sight to multiple other vehicles. I had absolutely no privacy to take care of certain things that I might need to take care of each day. So that was an awakening for me. It took me a while to figure out the whole curtain thing in an effective way. What I was eventually able to do in a Camry, and I've done the same thing in the minivan now, is along the headliner there's a piece of rubber trim, and I'm able to use little spring clamps that you can get a whole package of them for just a few dollars, and I just clip the fabric onto that rubber trim along the headliner, and it works great. And they're easy to put up, easy to take down, and I can move them around to wherever I need them. Another advantage with the curtains and the tint is it helps with sun glare. And if you're doing any work on a laptop or something like that in the vehicle, the sunlight bounces off the glass and gives you a lot of glare. So that helps with that too. So the seventh thing you're going to want to figure out is where you're going to sleep. We're all going to have to sleep, roughly 8 hours a day. And it's important that we are able to get a good night's sleep for health reasons and for comfort and mental focus and so on. So figure out where you're going to sleep and then test it. In the Camry, for example, the only thing that worked for me was to sleep in the front passenger seat with it reclined all the way. It didn't lay quite flat, but it was close, and that was the best I could do. It was fairly comfortable, not totally comfortable, but it was good enough. I tried sleeping in the back seat. It was far too small. I tried sleeping with the back seats folded down, my feet in the trunk, and the opening into the trunk was really small and the seats didn't lay flat, so that didn't work. So the best I could do was in the front seat. But so get an idea for where you're going to do it, and then test it before you actually move into the vehicle, because what you think is going to work, it just might not work as well as you expect. So that'll give you a chance to make any adjustments before you're actually committed. And then finally, personal hygiene matters. We all have to take care of every day. Whether that's using the restroom or shaving or bathing or whatever, changing clothes. These are all things we all have to do every day. And so try and figure out an idea for how you're going to do that in the car, and again, test it. Some things that you think are going to be simple are going to be a little more challenging. And a lot of people use buckets, for example, or jugs for relieving themselves when they don't have access to restrooms. I get down to Ehrenberg last year. I had a bucket I thought I was going to use in a pinch. I prefer to just go for a walk in nature, but there were so many people around I couldn't get out of sight of everybody. So, first time I tried to use it, I realized the bucket was too tall and I couldn't even use it in the car because the roof of the car was too low. So, as I say, test what your ideas, make sure it's going to work before you actually get in a position where you have to do it and you're not able to. So that way, if you have to make any adjustments, you can do it again ahead of time and make things easier for yourself. So to quickly recap what, to me, I think are the essentials. Downsize, you're going to have to downsize a lot of stuff if you're coming out of a house or an apartment. Find smaller gear for essential items whenever possible. That'll take up less space, save you the space and the weight. Organize with storage containers. Organization is really essential for living in a small space. And, use plastic boxes, duffel bags, whatever works for you. But find a way to be organized so you can find things and keep things neat and tidy and find them when you need them. Plan for where to camp in advance. That'll save you gas, mileage on your vehicle, and stress. Plan for meal preparation and cooking. It's something you're going to have to do every day. So if you can plan for it and prepare at least some of your meals in your vehicle or at your vehicle on a table next to it, it'll save you money and save you driving and make things easier. Plan for privacy. You're definitely going to want window tint if at all possible, and blackout curtains will give you even more privacy, especially at night if you have lights or electronics on inside the vehicle. Figure out where you're going to sleep in the vehicle, because that's something you're going to have to do. So figure out where you're going to sleep and test it. Make sure it's going to work and be reasonably comfortable. And finally, figure out matters of personal hygiene. Where are you going to do that in the vehicle? And again, test it. Make sure it's going to work for you. So all these ideas are basically going to be applicable whether you're doing boondocking out on public lands in the middle of nowhere, or whether you're doing urban stealth, with some variations. Boondocking is much easier if you're able to do it. But of course, boondocking, you're out in the middle of nowhere, sometimes called dispersed camping. You just go out in the middle of the desert or the forest and find a place to park. So the catch with that, of course, is you need income. So if you have retirement or disability income, or if you're a freelancer or self-employed, you can do your work from where you are, that's the way to go, really, because it's just much easier. A lot of the aggravation you have to deal with urban stealth camping just isn't an issue when you're boondocking. It is a lot easier in the western U.S. If you're in the eastern part of the country, there are some places you can boondock, but they're going to be a lot more limited, and they're going to be fewer and further between. So if you have the option and you're planning on doing this, you'll find it a lot easier out in the western U.S. Urban stealth will limit some of your options, but sometimes it's essential. Maybe you have to have a job, and so you have to be in town where you can work, or maybe you have medical things or some other reason that keeps you in the city. And if so, then you'll have to do urban stealth. It's more difficult to deal with hygiene matters, and your cooking may be more limited and things like this, but the basic same principles are going to apply in either case. So there are some of the things that I've found to be essential for successfully living in a car. I'm sure there's some things I forgot. Meanwhile, there's some other things I know I could have covered, but it's kind of outside the scope of this video. This is long enough already. Like, for example, if you're going to have to work and use a laptop or something, you're going to need a house battery with a way to recharge it, whether that's solar or continuous duty solenoid, so you charge off your car engine. but not everybody needs that. I know people who are boondocking and living in vehicles, and they just recharge their phone every few days. They don't use it much. And if you're doing that, you can just recharge it off your car engine. You don't need a separate house battery. So that's outside the scope of this. I'll probably talk about that in a later video, and there are probably some other things like that. I think these are the essentials that you really have to have, that you want to think about to live in a car successfully and reasonably comfortable. If you've been living in a car yourself and you got some other ideas, maybe throw them in the comments below. Share them with anybody else who's either just getting started doing this or thinking about doing it, and we can help them out that way. And if you're living in a car now and you got some questions I didn't answer, again, leave them in the comments. I'll try and answer them as best I can, and who knows, maybe I'll even do another video addressing some of the other things later on. But for now, that's what I think are probably the keys for successfully living in a car or a real small vehicle. And hope it helps you out if you're getting ready to do this or you're just starting off doing this. And we'll see you in the next video.